So recently, Claressa Shields has challenged Keith Thurman Jr. to a fight. A lot of people might call this daring to be great, but there has been something else going on with Claressa Shields for a long time. On one video, she stated that she became world champion in 4 fights, and then she says, I don't know, or was it 3? As if she doesn't even remember if she became world champion in 3 or 4 fights. Then she goes on to say, hey, I became undisputed champion in 8 fights. And then finally in the video, she says, I believe I have 13 world titles. And I'm not really, I know a lot about boxing, but something about the math and this is not working out for me. I have to sit back and, think about what she's saying. But anyway, she said, I became world champion in 4 or 3 fights. I became undisputed champion in 8 fights. And she also says she has 13 world titles. And finally, she says that if she was a man with the accolades that she has, she would easily be the greatest of all time. There's a few big problems. And let me just state right now, I love Claressa Shields. I love her story. I know about her before a lot of people know about her. I've been following her. I admire all the things she overcame in life. But what she's not understanding is, and I get it, you worked hard and you've had all these accomplishments in women's boxing. And, why isn't the math, why isn't the money equaling, your accomplishments? One of the biggest problems is that you're a pioneer. You're one of the forerunners. Dr. J could not make the money Michael Jordan made. The same way, there are going to be women boxers that come behind you that's going to make, a lot more money than you. You're a pioneer. You're bringing a lot of attention to women's boxing. But at the same time, some of the attention is starting to become a little negative because of some of the statements that she's making. The thing that's different between women's and men boxing, you cannot become a world champion in men's boxing with only 4 fights. So when she's bragging about becoming a world champion in 4 and then say, well, I don't know, was it 3? You're actually defeating your own argument because that's not possible. And that just says that the competition in women's boxing is extremely low. And that's the reason why you can't become a champion in 4 fights in men's boxing. You have to go to way too many people before you can become a champion. Even with the businessman Keith Davis, he has about 9 fights now. And a lot of people saying like, Dad, why is he getting so much notoriety and why is he getting so many TV opportunities when he's only had 7 or 8 fights? Well, he's up on the Bob Arum for one. Even with him having 8 fights, people are saying it's a big accomplishment in men's boxing just for him to get the opportunities he's had and attention he's had with only 8 fights. And he's not a world champion. But Claressa Shields is bragging about becoming a world champion in 3 or 4 fights. And then she goes on to say she became undisputed champion in 8 fights. That is absolutely impossible in men's boxing. I don't even know since men's boxing started, possibly, but I know in recent times there's no way there's ever been an undisputed men's boxer with 8 fights. It can't happen. Matter of fact, most boxers in men boxing, Keyshawn was an exception. Most people don't even know about the boxers until they have about 13 or 14 fights. Around fight 12 or 13, that's when most boxers, if they are undefeated, that's when they started getting a lot more notoriety. Now, in the social media age, things are changing a little bit now, but still, most boxers, if they only got 4 fights, no one would even know them, let alone them being a world champion. I'm not one of those people trying to attack Claressa Shields. I'm not hating on her, but she needs to think twice. So remember, Claressa Shields only have 14 fights total. She's bragging about making all of these accomplishments in 14 fights. No man can it's not even possible for a man to make those accomplishments in 14 fights. So to say, if I was a man, I would be considered the greatest of all time, I think, whatever she said. But to challenging Keith Thurman, we just seen with Earl Spence and Terrence Crawford. You never know. You can't underestimate anybody. But I believe it's highly unlikely that you can beat a Keith Thurman. And I'm just being honest. I understand you've done a lot in women's boxing. You've done it rather fast. But you are not a man. Men boxing is totally different from women's boxing. You said you think you can beat a Keith Thurman, a Sean Porter, or even a Triple G.
And I mean, I drop men. I bust men nose. I beat men up all the time. Uh, it's weird. Like if I was to say like which is the guy I think I could beat up, I think I could beat up Keith Thurman. I
Really?
really do. I think I could beat up Keith Thurman, even though they like, oh, he beat Sean Porter. I think I could beat Sean Porter too. Skill wise and just uh strength wise. I think that they may be stronger than me, but their boxing abilities isn't like mine. Triple G, he's older now, but I can give Triple G a run for his money.
But
I give him a run for his money.
power, you think you can hang in there with honestly? Because this is gonna make me.
You know what?
That is just not something that any rational boxing fan could see happening. And if I was you, I would think twice about challenging Keith Thurman. Actually, if I was Keith Thurman, I wouldn't even take the fight. Because if Keith Thurman takes this fight, it's a lose-lose for him. Either way, if he beat her, they're going to say, why you beat a woman like that? If he looks bad in any way, he doesn't even have to lose, he loses. And then she is a boxer, and she will get a shot off. If she gets any shot off, they're going to say, that's a loss for him. That's an L for him. If she gets any good shot off, that's an L for him. But overall, I believe that's what's really bothering Claressa Shields. It's the fact that she's seeing all of these men boxers, they're making millions and millions of dollars, and she comes along and she's doing all of these great things in women's boxing, and it's not adding up. Her pay is not equaling these guys' pay. And even the subpar boxers are getting big paydays by fighting the more elite boxers. So I know it's taking a toll on her mentally. As she going to these fights and she's hearing these big numbers and these big negotiations that these guys are having, and she's not getting equal pay. So I get that part. But the problem is that you're not making the same gates. You're not getting the same pay-per-views, which is not really your fault. You just, to be honest, it's just a little bit of I don't want to say bad timing, but in this time in women's boxing, the competition level is still not at the level that a large portion of the population are clamoring to see. It's like the WNBA. Advocates argue for them getting a higher pay. Some of them are not making more than people with blue-collar jobs. I do get it, too, when, I hate every time, you'll have some athletes like Tyson Fury or Conor McGregor and these guys, they do some of the most arrogant stuff, but a lot of times, soon as a black boxer does the same things and talk smack the same way or brag a little bit, they're called arrogant and things like that. They're supposed to act subordinate. You'll have a lot of fans who will say, oh, I don't like Floyd because he's not humble. Well, they don't apply that same logic to the white boxers. They glorify and they praise when these guys are acting arrogant and boasting. They cheering them on. But in this case, with women's boxing, I do think it's a little bit pushing it. At the state of women's boxing, I would say recommend for you to be a little bit humble and tone it down just a little bit, because you are going to turn away fans. By you being a pioneer of the sport, you're going to have to be a good sport about it a little bit and just realize right now at the state of women's boxing, your best chance right now to make higher purses is to do what you got to do to make the fans happy. And that means all of the fans. I think there's a problem when you constantly, complaining about what you deserve and what you should be. Even like you see Shakur doing a lot of times on social media, he's constantly complaining about, talking about what he deserves and who he's supposed to be and how somebody does this and that. You know what? None of that stuff matters. It's all about what you do in the ring. So at the end of the day, you gotta let what you do in the ring talk for you. And if what you're doing in the ring is not attracting the money that you want, attracting the fans that you want, it starts with you. Even Terrence Crawford complained, but in the day, he had to do what he had to do and fight who he had to fight. Only till you get the biggest fights do you really get the biggest money. So Claressa Shields in women's boxing, you're just not gonna get the biggest fights. What I mean by the biggest, I mean the fights that bring big paydays, bring a lot of people out, bring a lot of pay-per-views, sell out arenas and things like that. So, I think that's really eating at her right now. She's surrounded by men. She was surrounded by all the top men athletes, and she's seeing the way a lot of these guys are living. She's seeing the paydays they bringing in. So she's looking at herself and saying like, wow, I got all of these titles and stuff. I have all of this stuff, and why am I not living like this? So it's like, this is not fair. But like Allen them told Spence, you can't take that to the bank. You can't take your accolades to the bank.